I'm your host, Carolyn Solo, LCSW, EMDR therapist, and mom of 3 daughters. Thank you for joining me.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to episode 81 of the Future Template Parent Podcast. I am your host, Dr. Carolyn Solo, PhD LCSW, EMDR consultant, and mom of 3 daughters. Today, I am very excited to have a special guest with me, all the way from Jacksonville, Florida, which is very different weather than my 2 feet of snow that we currently have, I imagine. and
Well, so maybe not so
It
much.
snowed today?
No, I said it's still cold
Still
today,
cold today, yes. Like what?
but not as cold.
Cold what? I'm curious. What's the temperature in Florida right now?
I think the high today is going to be like 55.
Is everyone freaking out?
Freaking out. Out.
Oof. That's hilarious. Well, Amity is at LCSW in Jacksonville, Florida, and I am going to have her just introduce herself and give her story of EMDR and EMDR intensives, and we'll go from there. Yeah, take it away.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for coming.
Absolutely. So my name's Amity Olson. I am currently in private practice, and have been since we moved to Florida about 4 years ago. Prior to that, I was working for the state of Wisconsin as a treatment provider, specifically working with adult men who had been deemed more likely than not to sexually reoffend. And so it was a very specific niche and focus. And so transitioning, moving down to Florida gave me the opportunity to do my own thing. So I was really burned out on the other stuff.
How long had you done that for? That kind of
13 years.
That's a long time. Yeah.
I really enjoyed it. Absolutely enjoyed it. And COVID and all of the stuff I think that came with that really just kind of was a perfect storm of this is a lot and I need to shift.
Yeah. That must have been hard to try to work with those people during COVID. Jeez. Anyone really.
I was an essential worker, so I had to go into the office, but we couldn't meet in the same room. So I would be in my office, my patient would be in another room, and we'd be meeting via iPad.
Wow.
Because it was odd.
That was a wild time. That was a wild thought.
Yes. There were decisions made that I'm like, I don't get it, but here we are.
Right.
In transitioning to private practice, I really opened myself up to all the things as far as developing my caseload, just because I needed a caseload. And as time has gone on, I've slowly been able to identify what really feeds me and where I feel most with my clients. And so I have really been working towards niching down in that way, which involves EMDR, right? I was first introduced to EMDR when I was working in Wisconsin. And then we were offered training that they wanted all of the treatment providers trained in EMDR because we do a lot of trauma.
Yeah, that's so awesome that they.
Yeah. And so I wasn't really sold on it, but it's an expensive training, as we all know. It's a time-consuming training. So I said, sure.
Right.
Like I had a choice.
Guess I'll.
But I was completely sold after that first training. I'm like, oh my goodness. That being said, I didn't realize it would become like my primary method or intervention that I would be using at that time.
Yeah.
Once I opened up my own practice, I went through the process of getting certified and all that kind of stuff. And it's really become something that I find so effective for my clients, for myself, and life-changing, which I really appreciate.
Yeah, I totally agree. I'm just curious, like how far along were you at your job in Wisconsin when you got trained at EMDR? Like when did that happen?
As far as how long had I been a provider?
Yeah, like I guess how many years ago, I guess I'm asking.
Oh, so probably about 5 years ago, 6 years ago.
So you had the opportunity to use it some with your clients there before.
Yeah. Yeah, but it was not our primary mode of therapy. But we were incorporating, like I said, we did a lot of work And so we started incorporating it quite a bit prior to my leaving. But then, of course, with COVID, it limited some of our options.
Right.
So
Right. Yeah. How did you find it working with that population and using EMDR, especially when you were kind of early in your journey with it?
yeah, it was effective. I specifically worked with men who um, weren't experiencing any cognitive delays, were relatively motivated for treatment, even though it is a prescribed treatment type of setting. Like, they're not placed in that facility because they want to be there.
Right.
And I also worked with individuals that were lower in psychopathy, right? And so we had a large population which was high in psychopathy. And so these were individuals that were more willing and open to healing in the process,
Yeah.
which made it a lot easier for them to see progress and for them to engage in the process.
Sure. Yeah.
Where for some of our clients, this just wasn't something they were open to.
Yeah.
For a variety of reasons,
Right.
be it their personality or be it just as we all experience with trauma, like the general fear of opening those things up and what can it mean or not mean.
And it's vulnerable to be someone who is, an offender in that particular, a sexual offender can feel really scary to open up to somebody like that when you already could perceive, worry about how you're perceived, I guess.
Well, and so there's always, the fear of judgment, right? And so for so many of my patients specifically, they experience their own abuse.
Sure, of course, right?
And so that process, and so that the fear of that information being used against them in some way.
Right. Of course. Yeah.
And in some cases it was, right? And so their fears and concerns were valid. And so helping them find the balance in that was hard. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think, it's kind of a trial by fire, but I think it's a good example of, because I think, we've talked about this, the group, like often there's this perception that you can't do EMDR with people with really complex trauma. And like that group, of course, that's what you were dealing with. And they still saw results. So I just think that's a testament to like, if you're providing a safe container and you have a relationship that's safe, like you can do this work with those people. So
it's more nuanced, right? But also just as effective.
Right. You're not just like, okay, now we're going into phase 4 and standard protocol and not shifting at all and blah, blah, blah. Yeah.
Right.
But yeah. So all that to say, thank you for sharing that. I think it's really, really cool to always hear where everyone kind of comes from and where they got to EMDR in their journey, because it's not like it's taught in grad school for 99% of us.
And it's definitely a niche you kind of fall into versus seek out.
Right. I think it often happens that people are like, I am tired of the work. Like what I'm doing isn't getting clients where I want them to get. And so what else is there? And then you hear about this and you're like, oh, maybe this is the thing.
Right.
Yeah. So I think that's what happens to a lot of people. I hope that it'll get more. I mean, it's constantly getting more mainstream, but like I know of one graduate program that actually is a course you can take an elective to get trained in EMDR. And I think that's really cool. And I would love to see that more. Yeah.
Nice.
I think it's in Ohio somewhere. Anyway. So that's how you got into EMDR. How did you get interested in intensives? Like what kind of piqued your interest in those?
To be honest, I don't remember when I was first introduced to the idea of intensives, but it was in the last couple of years. And I became interested in it when, one, I recognized I didn't feel like I was able to move along my hourly clients as quickly and efficiently and effectively as I wanted to, right? Yep. And so while we were doing EMDR, we just felt stagnant. And so when I offered an extended session, like a 90-minute session to one of my clients, and that was super helpful. And like, okay, let's just keep broadening it out, right? And so I introduced intensives at the beginning of last year. Floated it out to me.
Beginning of 2024. Yeah.
Yep, beginning of 2024. Floated it to my current caseload, started, the information on my website, things along those lines, with the hope and the idea that over the course of the year, I would be able to slowly transition my caseload from the standard hourly practice to an intensive model. That did not work. My caseload was very much insurance dependent. And so, as we know, insurance doesn't easily cover, right off the bat unless they're wanting to do out of network benefits.
Right.
And so,
And even that is only a small, like an hour of the intensive a day.
Right. And so about 6 months in, so like June, July, I recognized I was going to have to transition away from insurance in order to accommodate the direction that I wanted to go, which meant that I would have to transition my caseload that I was currently working with. And so that was terrifying. It also tugged at my ethical heartstrings a little bit. And so whereas like, how do you even go about doing that? And I recognized I wasn't marketing and setting up my business part of things in a way that facilitated that transition either.
Right.
And so that's kind of where I started exploring those pieces. I did an online business thing, business class, I guess, related to setting up EMDR intensives, which was helpful. But again, didn't facilitate much change. And that is when I found you on Instagram, which was a much more interactive, here's what you need to do, and how to do it, type of process, along with the accountability and the support of having a team or group to do that with.
Yeah.
And so
we had such a great group. It was just really a wonderful group of people.
It was so fun because we were all at different points in relation to not just our skill set, but also the role that EMDR intensives would play in our work.
Right.
And then just everybody kind of had their own strengths that they were bringing to the table.
Totally.
Right.
Totally. Yeah.
So, yeah.
It's interesting that like the video courses, right? Like I feel I've done a couple of them too, way back. And I feel like they're just like, do intensives. They're so great. And you're like, cool. Like, if it were that easy, we'd all be doing it already. And I'm not saying that those courses don't have, I think they can make things seem possible. And like, okay, people are doing this. There are ways to do this. But I found that part lacking too. I was like, okay, but now what? Like, it's not magic.
Right.
Something else has to happen. So,
right. Like, so it, like the therapeutic process made all the sense in the world. Right. Because it's just an extension of what we already do and what we already know. Like, so that part, that was fine.
Like, you didn't need convincing of that.
Correct. Right. It was more the business structure, and to be honest, like marketing.
Yeah.
Up until this point, I have not marketed myself outside of psychology today.
Right. Well, when you're an insurance-based provider, you don't really have to, right? That is your marketing.
That is my marketing. And so like that was just a whole new thing for me.
Yeah.
And especially not being super active on social media and having to tap into that.
You have come so far in that. I've been watching your growth over like you've just really been like, I'm going to do this. And like, it's hard because it takes a little while for things to gain traction and to feel like it's worth the effort. It also gets easier the more you do it, which helps.
It has. I worked with another business coach that isn't therapy related, but just like marketing related. That was like my first kind of exposure to it, I think in the middle of last year. And so And then again, when I found you, like the idea, I'm like, I need to focus specifically on this field, right?
Yeah.
And then you had different suggestions and ideas on how that has gone. And so the whole Reels membership for like the business of therapy has been amazing.
I tell I'm
because
like, that's like one of the best investments I've ever made. And it's
it's
so
so
affordable.
it so is, and because like I am creatively challenged,
Well, it's
right?
all of
And
us are.
so
And we're like time challenged. Who wants to spend your time figuring out what to post every week? It's like so hard.
yeah, yeah. And so that has been extremely helpful.
Yeah.
And so the last piece has been the whole Instagram stories piece, which I'm still trying
But you're
to
figuring it out.
nail
Not
down.
like in some ways, I feel like that's the hardest because it feels so vulnerable.
I don't like it. And it's just more like the technical
Yeah.
process too.
And that
Like,
gets easier too. Although yesterday I was doing one, I was like, wait, what the heck do you do when you want to put a picture up behind you? It's like 10 minutes to remember. And I was like, oh yeah, green screen. So it is annoying. There's little pieces but they do, all of that gets so much easier the longer you do it. But it's annoying. And it's one of those things at first where you're like, I'm never going to get this. This is so hard. And then you do, but it's very like, it takes so long at the beginning.
it does. And I had my child help me. 'Cause,
Yes. Teenagers.
he's in it.
Yeah.
Yay, teenagers.
Mhm.
Like, help your mom put this together, please.
That's awesome.
He was fair.
That's good. And he wasn't just like, Mom, you're so old.
Right. Right.
Whatever.
He didn't shame me too
That's
much.
good.
It was nice.
And you've also, one thing I think that you have started doing really well is blogging. And that's become a really essential part of your, and that was something that you really started getting really into during the group. I remember you were like, I'm going to do this. This is going to be a thing that I do.
Yeah.
Tell us, would you mind sharing a little bit about that? Because I think you've been doing that really well.
Yeah.
I
it
always
was
read your blog posts because I think they're very good.
Oh, well, thank you. Because that's the thing. Like, I'm not quite sure how much of a reach it's had, but yeah, it was something that I'd wanted to do, but I wasn't quite sure how to do it effectively, where it wasn't a huge time suck.
Right.
And so when we first started meeting and we focused so heavily on the marketing piece, I'm like, yep, we're going to do that.
Mhm.
And so I found a way to use AI to my advantage in that. And so specifically in helping me identify topics.
That's so hard.
Um,
It's one of the hardest parts.
because
It's like, what the heck do I write about?
correct.
Yeah.
I'm like, so here's my goal. Here's where I'm wanting to go. Give me topics that are going to help me get there. Right. And then with that structure, it really helped me focus in on, okay, here's how we're going to do it. And this is what we're going to do. And so with that, I've been able to really quickly and efficiently lay out the blog, get it structured for mass email send outs, but also social media and things like that. And so I'm able to lay that like a whole month out or even a quarter out in a couple days to a week and then be done with it.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's been super helpful. But again, thank you for letting me know you read them. I'm not quite sure how big the reach has been so far. And so my plan is to assess that this year and see
I mean, I
if
know
I
there
can
are.
back off with the frequency a little bit or like,
Yeah, right. What do you use to like send out your like what email thing do you use?
use MailChimp.
So there must be a way to track, right? Like how many people open them, how many people clicked. Yeah.
Yep.
You
Yep.
just- yeah.
I just don't have I don't have a large mailing list.
Right. And that's why blogging is a good idea, actually. One of the reasons why, because you're not just like people are Googling that. You're not just relying on, the people who are on my email list will get this. It's like other ways of, yeah. Well, would you mind, just because, other people should know, what are some of the things you talk about on your blog? Just for our wonderful listenership, reader, whatever they're called, to know what you're doing and maybe there are topics that interest them and they can start reading.
Right. I have, and
I'll link it in, I'll link your blog in the.
Yeah. Thank you. This whole niching down process, I realize I have a couple different ones.
Yeah, we worked on this together. Like I remember, we did some work on that.
Yes. I was like, do I just stick with one? Do I do? Well, I don't know. Anywho, the biggest niche I have is working with adult women who experienced or grew up with emotional neglect. Um, and so that was a large large portion of my population as I opened up my caseload, or built my caseload here. And I find that it's one that I really gravitate to strongly in helping women, um, just develop and strengthen into their authentic selves and heal from all of those messages that we've been given throughout our lives about we should be smaller and take up less space.
Right. Yeah.
Be it in our family of origin, be it in work, be it as a parent, whatever.
Yeah.
And it's reassuring for me. It's helpful for my patients and my clients, and I love it.
Yeah.
Um,
And such a natural fit for EMDR, of course.
oh my God, so much.
Yeah.
My second niche, kind of more my personal focus is working with moms who are raising kids with multiple and severe food allergies.
Right.
Just because I am one. My son, who is 17, was first diagnosed with food allergies at 6 months old, and has multiple. I think we started with like 20 food allergies, and now we are at 12. And so, yeah, it's been a roller coaster with it.
Yeah.
And just being able to help other moms in that position, right? We have learned so much during our time and experiences, and I just want to be able to pass that along
Totally.
and support others that are going through it.
And talk about like traumas. I can only imagine seeing your child, you know, in a potentially life-threatening situation, how that impacts you as a parent, as a mom.
Yeah. His first anaphylactic reaction, I think he was a year and a half, maybe 2. And it was to a food that he had originally tested negative for, that he could have, right? So we thought we were doing something safe.
Right.
We thought we were fine, and we were not, right? And
That's
so
so awful.
the hypervigilance that comes along with that. And then as he gets older and becomes more independent, like the fear of like allowing that independence versus like wanting to keep them close. And as he obviously is going to be moving off to college in the next year, right? Like that is fun. Even though we know that he's so well versed in taking care of himself. Like, and so like that contradiction, that dichotomy between we know he knows the things and holy shit, we're not going to be there monitoring.
Right. Right. Exactly. Oh, yeah. Yeah. And I do think like, I think that's such a perfect example of like someone who hasn't been through that process to some degree. How could, I mean, sure, anyone, an EMDR therapist can treat a lot of things, but what someone who has that personal experience can bring to working with a mom who was going through that is just so different, right?
Yeah. My current clients our ability to one, commiserate,
which is important.
Yeah. It's like, have you tried this? Have you heard of this resource?
Yeah.
Not this, like, right? Like it's your own little community of thing. If you haven't had that experience, you're just not going to know.
Of course. Why would you?
Yeah. But also to get, I've had clients who have their own food allergies, and I've been able to pick their brains about, okay, so what was your experience going out to the bars and drinking, right? Because that's a big fear for a lot of parents.
Sending kids off to college. Sure.
Right. Do they lose the inhibition to monitor their safety when they're drunk or high, right? Like, what does that look like? What is that experience? How do they keep themselves safe from other people who may, there's so many stories of kids passing out drunk, and while they're drunk, people rub peanut butter all over their face, right? And how do they keep themselves safe in that context? And so, there's a lot I've learned from my clients, but also then I'm able to support their efforts in maintaining their mental health and their physical health. through those experiences. So yeah, it's definitely been a mutually beneficial type of experience.
Right. And I think that that's something that I feel like as therapists, we sometimes are reticent to talk about, but I think it is actually really important that like we do learn from our clients and that's okay.
Absolutely.
We're not like pumping them for information or whatever, but like that's one of the beautiful things about having an intimate relationship with this person is like,
Yeah.
we learn from them, of course. And then we bring that knowledge to anyone else we work with.
Absolutely. I shouted from the mountaintops, like, hey, I learned from somebody else. This is their experience. Here, this may help you, things like that. Right. And so it's a small community, it's an important community. And so to kind of come back to your original question, blog, my hope is to be able to continue to impart that information. And so my blog takes 3 different focuses. One is the emotional neglect part. The other is the food allergy support part. And then I recently started with ketamine assisted psychotherapy, which then kind of ties into all of those pieces. So,
and I think there's a real interest in people doing EMDR intensive. Well, EMDR, my understanding about KAP is like it is a longer time process usually anyway, right? Like you're not just going to sit with someone for 45 minutes and be like, bye. So
right.
it naturally creates this intensive container to some degree. And I haven't done any training on this. I'm just sort of from what I've heard, but it seems like that's the case. Is that accurate?
It really likens itself. It's a really good match with an EMDR intensive process. And so you have, similar to what we do with intensive, you have your like pre-intensive meeting, pre-cap session where we kind of review goals and intentions and what we're working towards. And then you have the cap dosing session, which is about 3 hours, but it's just focused on dosing, right? We're not doing any actual therapy during that time, except maybe I'm taking notes on whatever comes up for you, right? So we come back and revisit it when we actually meet for our intensive. Like we're able to use that window of like, so the ketamine really opens up the mind to new insights, new information. There's a much more technical, process and description of that. That it's not coming to mind at the moment.
Oh, but that makes sense the way you said it. So
right. Good. I'm glad. But that effect lasts a good 2 to 3 weeks and longer for some people. And so we're able to use that window where that walls come down, things along those lines, which allows people to access some of those pieces of information that one, EMDR does in the first place. 2, like even more so in a way that feels safer and maybe isn't as emotionally jarring because you have the support of that medication on board. And so it really works well together.
That is so cool. Are you still training or have you done any of it yet or?
Already, I'm done with the training. Because again, it's a natural extension of what we already do. So it's more just the dosing piece is the training part. And so I have yet to facilitate one. I've observed. I'm getting ready to do my own dosing session. So I'm super excited about that. But I have gone through like the screening process and things like that. And I work with Journey Clinical and it has been a super easy and thorough process. Like they've got it down, man. And because I have some health issues that may preclude me from being able to do ketamine, right? And so I was able to see how thorough they are with that and checking and making sure that people who are taking it actually can take it, that we're not going to cause more problems, that we're not going to put people's health at risk in order to just, support this piece.
Right.
So it's been a really helpful process.
Oh, I can't wait to hear how that
goes for you. I had a consult earlier this week for my first possible client to do it with. And so I'm hopeful that it works out and that we're able to do it. So.
Well, that's really exciting. really exciting. Keep me
I'm
posted.
excited
I really
about
want to
it.
hear how that goes.
Yeah.
So that's so cool. I'm really, really strongly considering doing that. So anyway, I'm just very curious to hear people talking about it.
Psychedelics have always been, and I mean, ketamine isn't necessarily psychedelic, but it has that type of effect. Have always been something I've been interested in and curious about. I didn't know until it came up in our group that it's something that I could actually do as a provider.
Yeah.
I thought it could be done in a medical setting,
Right.
in a very specific way, things along those lines. And so when I learned that wasn't necessarily the case, I
Well, that opens up so
totally,
much. Yeah.
yeah. And so it totally ties in with something that I've been really interested in and think is super helpful and useful. And now I get to tie it in with the EMDR
Yeah.
intensives, which I also find super helpful and
That's so
useful.
cool.
And so it really has been a win-win.
Yeah.
for
Yeah. It
that.
sounds I'm excited to hear how that goes because I think there's so much potential there for sure.
Yeah, I agree.
Regarding kind of just sort of in terms of the group, like where you were at when you started with intensives and kind of where you are now, what would you say? I mean, we certainly talked a little bit about like getting a lot more active on Instagram, the blogging. You reformatted your whole website, right? Didn't you do new brand
Like
color?
the time's over.
Yeah, it looks so beautiful now. I love it's so serene. It's gorgeous.
And so that was the other benefit of like everybody doing this at the same time, right? Is I was able to, and we shamelessly stole from each other.
But yeah,
All the
helped each other. Helped each other.
yeah, yes, like please use what I put
Right,
together.
exactly. Why not? I mean, yeah.
So learning from how others formatted theirs and how this worked for me, and so yeah, I think I'm finally at my final iteration of my website as far as like how it feels and how it kind of jives with me.
Yep, I
But
think that's great.
so marketing was a big
Yeah.
piece. But I also finally got to do an intensive, right? Because through this process and through the support and the suggestions that we were able to get, is that I finally had the courage to transition my caseload, right? I finally made the decision to like, nope, I'm all in on this, right? Versus kind of just dipping a toe in here and there. And
You do
so
have to kind of commit, or else it'll be like, it's on my website, but no one's booking it. It's like, well, you got to kind
right,
of push it to some degree.
I had to take the lead.
Yeah.
And so I have maintained 5 or 6 clients with insurance just because they're clients that one fall into my niche that I love, but also we just have really good connections
Yeah,
and
sure.
work really well together. And so I mean eventually they may transition out, but that's fine.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's fine. But in that, I finally went from, hey, I have no intensives, nobody's asking, to I've done a few intensives and people are asking, right? And so that's huge.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna lie, I had anxiety, especially in December when our numbers go down naturally
Sure.
anyway, because people are traveling, busy with holiday events and stuff like that. So December was terrifying for me. The new year, which I knew would happen, obviously as people are like, yep, I want to do this.
Great. Awesome.
Need and want to get healthy. So absolutely seeing more engagement.
Awesome.
I have why can't I think of the words that I want to use? I have 3-day intensive scheduled for next week.
Amazing.
Yeah, I'm super excited about it, but also super anxious because, well, and we've talked about this. Like, it's hard to read our clients sometimes, and if they're new to us, so it's even harder to know.
This is
how
a new client.
It's a new client,
which is, I just want to say congratulations, because that's even a bigger achievement, I think, than booking a 3-day with a current client. That's huge. That speaks to a lot of the work you have done coming to fruition. So I just want to say congratulations, because that is huge. Yeah.
I'm super excited. And they were referred by one of my other clients who had done a 2-day. So that was even cooler.
Yep, because you did a great job.
Yeah. They were talking it up and how awesome it was, and I loved it. So there's that. I have a return client coming back for another intensive that I did. And then the consult I had this week, which was awesome, was referred by one of the people that I networked with. Early
All
on
that forced
in
networking I made you guys do.
the forced networking that you made us do, that everybody's like, yeah, I don't get a lot of return on investment on that. And this, was referred from one of those people I connected with.
That's
And
amazing.
so regardless if it ends up working out for us or not, like the benefit, it just showed how
Exactly. I mean, I think that's, it's like getting them to book a consult call is in some ways, that's the hardest piece because you have to do the networking and the marketing, which is the stuff that nobody wants to do. And then, not everyone is going to book on that consult call, but over time that you gain traction and momentum there too, because you become known for that one. So most of the time people are coming on to that call already knowing that's what they're asking for. But that takes time too. So there's stages in it, but you're moving through those stages very, 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 very clearly. But I think it takes the intention that you guys all came into the group with of I'm going to change my practice. And you knew you had to do stuff to make that happen.
Yes. And I think we did well in holding each other through our fear. Because we all, at different stages, were breaking out. And we would take turns reassuring each other that it's okay, we're going to, everything's going to be fine.
And seeing, stuff that was going on. But I will never forget the group member who tried to talk her client who wanted an intensive into seeing somebody else. And we're like, no. She wants to do one with you. What?
Right. You are more than capable of doing this. Do not refer them out. You are fine.
Yeah. But that was great. I mean, that was something else. I wanted to ask one more thing because I know I want to respect your time and about the money piece. So in terms of moving from, insurance-based to charging for intensives, how's that process been for you? Because it's so hard. So hard.
You guys talked me through a lot of it, right? You guys talked me through a lot of it because there was this, one, I didn't know how to price myself. Two, going so high that it felt like a punch in the gut to me. And then I had to I adjusted back down, right? I went shoot for the moon type piece and I'm like, yep, okay. And then the more I sat with it, the more I started freaking out. And so I'm like, you know what? Clearly I'm not ready.
Sure. And that's part of it. You have to be ready.
Right. Right. And so I backed myself back down to a point where it still was outside my comfort zone, but I could at least sit with it. And so that has been, it's gotten easier, but it's been hard because my inclination is to oh, that's a lot of money. And I'm like, yeah, let me try to accommodate that in some way to ease your discomfort, right? Although a lot of our discussions come back to mind when I'm doing that is any other profession would not be doing this.
Oh, you need medical extracted. $3,000 is a lot. How about $50?
Right. Right. And I know a big part of that comes from our training, right? As far as social workers, we are inherently kind of the bleeding hearts, right? Because we want to be helpful. We want to do all the things. And so the idea of I need to also make a living wage and support my family, those can seem to be in contradiction a lot. And I did not go into social work, as most of us do, to make money, right?
Clear. But even if you're making $200,000 a year, you're not Elon Musk, for God's sake.
No, I'm not making billions off of what I'm doing.
And you're still helping people.
I'm still helping people. But but I also need to support my family and be part of that process, right?
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
so one does not need to preclude the other.
Right.
Um,
But there's
and
absolutely discomfort and fear that has to be worked through in that process.
yes, and the judgment of others in our profession, the idea that we need to be accessible to all, when in reality, I don't need to be accessible to
And we
everybody.
can't
No,
be. We can't.
and I no,
We're not responsible for our screwed up healthcare system. Jeez.
no, no. Oh God,
Yeah.
in the beginning of the year and the new transition to insurance starting all over again has me in that spot
Yeah.
anyway.
I
So
know. Oh, geez, I know.
not just like
Yes,
professionally, but
personally, yes,
personally.
I'm right there with you. Totally. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm sorry. That medication is how much?
Yeah, right.
What?
Exactly. And like speaking of being able to take care of your family, so therefore you need resources so that you can like
Yes.
roll with try at least to survive those things as they come.
Right.
You know?
Right.
It's not geez.
And so I think one, I got a lot of education in that area as part of a group, but part of that education was also alternative options for our clients, such as care credit,
Mhm.
right? That has been huge. And so being able to offer that as an option to my clients, but also I think landed on Thrive, which helps my clients process their out of network benefits,
Right.
which could be a pain in the ass
Yep.
because this like double secret probation like process of like, I know it's an option, but how do we use it
Right.
type thing. Then this takes that all out of
Right.
it, which has been super helpful
Yeah.
for me because
Yeah.
I don't know how to navigate that. And so I know my clients don't know.
Right.
And so here's somebody who does it for
Right.
you, which makes it so easy.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then it allows me the opportunity to actually take the clients that need to use insurance, right? That I can still facilitate that for a small group of people.
Right.
Then I'm able to find that balance.
And does that, just to
And
be clear, does that cover more than the initial like 1 hour, or does that Thrive, I mean? Like
Thrive? No, it just facilitates the processing of the out of network
right.
claims.
And have you noticed with clients like what tends to be covered? Is there
Really good question. I actually have the one client that I have that uses it is going to be doing another intensive with me, and so I don't know what she received.
yeah.
So I'm
Yeah,
curious.
yeah, I am
What?
too, because in my experience it's just been like the first hour of a day, but that might not be true anymore. Who knows? So I'd be
Yeah,
curious.
I don't know. Guess is she's a medical professional. Her insurance is already pretty stellar because she's a medical
Yeah.
professional. And so I'm curious
Yeah.
what,
Yeah.
because then my guess is that different plans and different programs reimburse differently,
Right.
as
Right.
we know is true
Right.
regardless. And so I'm curious what hers
Right.
what is.
So just one more question and then we will wrap up about the kind of money piece. Like how have clients responded when you have quoted like the intensive fee that you've decided on?
Yeah. And so a big part of me losing my caseload or transitioning my caseload has been my clients weren't open to that fee. And so I did not get a lot of my current caseload taking advantage of
And they were
an
insurance based primarily.
they were all
Right.
insurance
Right.
based. My client, my one client that did, again, medical field, knows the benefit and process of navigating all of that. So she was completely like, yep, cool, that's fine.
Right.
I like it. Let's do it. The three clients that have been new have all been like, that makes sense. Seems reasonable.
Yeah.
Completely doable.
Awesome.
And so they haven't batted an eye at
Which of
the
course is a
cost.
good time that you could raise it a little bit. But anyway,
Also true.
when you're ready,
Also,
when you're ready.
I will do
But it is a good
at some
it is a good
Sure.
confidence booster to get that response and know that the value is recognized and that your professional like expertise is valued, and not just have people be like, who the hell do you think you are? Or whatever we sure they might say, you know?
Right.
And even people who can't swing it probably are just like, yeah, I can't do that.
Right. And so I've had a couple consults where that they haven't gone through. And I don't know if that's because of finances or not.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
When I've shared the information, there hasn't been a lot of doubt
Right.
about it,
Yeah.
but it very well could be.
Yeah.
That's why,
And
they
that's going to
did
happen.
both.
There are going to be
Absolutely.
people who cannot do it, and
Absolutely.
that's true even if you offer hourly out of network therapy.
Right. Like that's not a new experience.
It's part of owning a private practice is that you cannot serve everyone.
Right.
Right.
And I'm more than happy and
You still
often
have, like you said, your 5 or 6 insurance-based clients. You're absolutely still serving people who really need, you're doing that in a way too. So it's not like you've given up on that part entirely.
I just know in order for me to support my family, that cannot
That can't be everything
be
you do.
my primary
Yeah.
mode of payment.
Right.
It
Yeah.
can't.
Yeah. No.
And so, yes, I have a partner who brings in an income, absolutely, and he does well. And at the same time, like it can't be, nor can it be, his sole responsibility
Right.
to provide for
Exactly.
all of us.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's the world we live in now. Everything's expensive.
Right.
And I know I said that was the last thing. One last thing. Did you feel
Yeah.
like the group, this I'm putting you on the spot, was worthwhile in moving you along this process?
Oh my God, 100%. 100%. And I think when I first contacted you to talk about it and get set up, like I was going back and forth between, do I do the group or do I just do a one-on-one with you? Knowing the one-on-one was more expensive, but I'm like, do I need that more? Do I need that specific, this is what you do? And ended up doing the group, and I'm so glad I did.
Yeah. It was such a great,
Because one, as a private practice, you don't have that network. You don't have that support that you feel in a larger practice. And so having the people and developing those relationships was huge. And just our ability to support each other through everything. And continues, right? Like, yes, the group is done, but we maintain contact and we're going to transition into different ways of doing that. But continuing to be able to be like, hey, this happened, or can you guys take a look at this and give me some feedback? What would you do in this situation? Am I overthinking this? Am I underthinking it? Like just being able to have that community and with people who get it.
Yeah, because where else do you go to ask those questions and when people don't know what you're talking about? And you're not sure if you've developed trust. You guys have trust.
Right. And now we have the history of how each of us got there, so we can kind of use that to gauge our feedback and where we need to support each other and all of that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Oh, well, I was so glad you were in the group. Thank you for trusting that with the first round, you were still going to, as I bumbled through up figuring it out myself, you guys were so gracious as I was figuring it all out.
And enough that, right? You were going through your own transition and it allowed all of us to be more relaxed, right?
I think that was true.
Coming to the table exactly as we are, because we were all coming from different walks of life and different paths. And I think it created a much more relaxed environment, which allowed all of us to just kind of be ourselves and do our thing. Because you were doing the exact same thing at the exact same time.
For sure was. Well, I'm going to let you go, but thank you so much for doing this. This was so great. I am excited for people to hear this and learn from you because there's a lot of great stuff you shared. And I'm just so thrilled to hear how things are going. And I think that 2025 is going to be an exciting year for you because there's a lot of great stuff.
I am super.
And in the future, as you see this ketamine stuff take off, I'd love to have you back to talk about that more specifically because I think people would be so interested. And Mary is doing it as well. So it would be if like you guys both came on and we could all three of us talk about it.
It would be awesome.
I think people would love to hear that. Would be so curious.
I think somebody else was doing it too. Is it Hannah?
Oh, really? Oh, cool. Oh my gosh, we could have a roundtable discussion. That'd be so fun.
I don't know. I know she was doing the kind of meet and greet, but I don't know if she decided to go all in and incorporate it in.
Oh my gosh, you guys can be leading the charge of EMDR intensives and ketamine psychotherapy. That'd be so cool.
Right?
You can start speaking at conferences. Anyway, I would have big plans. We'll take it one step at a time. Anyway,
One thing.
thank you so much. I am excited for everyone to hear everything you have to share. And thank you again for being part of the group. It was such a pleasure.
Yeah,
All
I
right.
loved it. Thank you so much.
Okay, take good care.